I think what I always advise to people who ask me, what do you really want? What do you really want with your photography? Where do you want to go? Because it will give them a sense of, if they know, it will give them a sense of destination. You know? If you don't know what you want, you'll just be floating around and buying gadgets that you don't need. The real art is not only in the techniques, but that, like gear oriented, what kind of lens or what kind of software, but it is also, the personality of the artist too. Somebody asked, a great photographer, hey, what gear do you use? Nikon or Canon? And he said, my eyes. Actually, I grew up in a small town in Philippines where we didn't have electricity until 1981. So when I was grade 2, I went to the classroom of my sister and I saw this picture on the wall. It's black and white. And it's a picture of a girl sitting on a big cup. And that sparked my interest, like, wow, what a big cup, how did they do that? And then I went inside the room and I saw another picture. She was standing on a big spoon. And, provincial town, we didn't have cameras, I didn't have cameras, but I started drawing because I didn't have camera. It really interested me, and my grandmother would always throw around a lot of National Geographic magazines, and I would go through them. I don't necessarily read them. I'm just interested with the images. So that sparked my interest in photography. But since I don't have a camera, then I did drawings. And if I can remember well, I think I was the only one in our town that's really pursuing illustration and art and graphic design. And since it was a farming and fishing, town, art is quite strange, It's like, why don't you just farm, instead of just drawing the mountains? The idea is always like that. It seems like artists are lazy in some sense. Because all they do is just draw and draw silly things. That's what they say. The buffalo, the mountain, the cornfields. So, it was not basically a very fertile, environment to start with, as far as art is concerned. But I pursued it, I keep on drawing, and my grandmother was very encouraging. She would give me, materials, crayons, papers, and there was a sense of encouragement. In fact, one time I drew on the walls in her house, and my aunt got so angry. She said, you should never do that. But my grandmother said, don't erase it, because years from now, he will remember that he drew those images. And that was, one of the biggest encouragement with me. So I pursued art, and a lot of people discourage me. They always say, you cannot feed your family with that. Go get some real job. And it was quite discouraging. So instead of taking up fine arts, I took up business administration. I finished it, and I was not happy at all. Really unhappy with it. After I graduated, I have a sort of soul searching. I'm asking myself, what am I really good at? And the answer is drawing, arts. I didn't have a camera during that time, so I just keep on, painting, drawing. So I basically started with illustration and painting before I went into photography. And true enough, after I graduated business administration, I went into fine arts. Like it was my choice, and I was paying for myself now because, my parents said that, okay, we're done with our obligation, then, whatever you want to pursue, do it, but on your own. So I left home, I had a job, and I put myself to school. I lasted only 1 year because there was a hiring for United Nations High Commission for Refugees. One of the teachers who were teaching in that refugee camp went to visit my dad because they were relatives, and she saw my work. Actually, the work is outside. It's a pen and ink drawing of an old man playing a guitar. And she asked my dad, "Who did this?" And my dad said, "It's my son." He said, let him apply to United Nations for refugees. So my dad told me that, and I did, I applied. Lots of applicants, and there were only 3 of us who got hired. And so that myth that the artist cannot feed the family, that's not true at all. And I was really wondering at first, a refugee camp needs an artist, illustrator, and photographer. How can that be? It's a refugee camp. Then I realized that our job there was to make books. We served Vietnamese refugees during that time, the Amerasian kids, and most of them don't know English at all, because in Vietnam they were not allowed in schools. They were discriminated because they were sons and daughters of the former enemy, the GIs. So when they came to our refugee camp, most of them are illiterate and don't know English, and then they're going to the United States. So their time basically in the refugee camp was is a transition, so that when they go to the States, they will not have these culture shocks. So our job there is to teach them, basic English, and to teach somebody who doesn't know, or illiterate, who doesn't know English at all, was through visuals. So I was able to use my art to help others through books. The teachers would just show them these visuals and would encourage them to speak in English. It generates communication. So, I was very happy with that.